もしやコスモでは。
Cosmo makes me free.
コスモ AP ラグジュアリースポーツ。
Welcome to episode 52 of my 76 Mazda Cosmo restoration. In this episode, I promise no electronics. This is going to be 100% cutting, grinding, welding, all fabrication. So what am I going to fabricate? Well, honestly, stuff I've done before. See, in any long-running project, there's a lot of time to think. And I've been thinking over the past 2 years that there are a few aspects of the build so far that I'm not really happy with. So, we're going to fix them. As you can probably guess by now, one of those areas is the intercooler. I've just never been happy with the way this is positioned at a strange, contradictory angle with everything else in the engine bay. In fact, when I installed it, you'll recall that I described this piping in kind of unflattering terms. So, as well as the intercooler, there's going to be 3 other areas that I'm going to revisit. Those things will be the aforementioned intercooler, the ball joints, the HVAC bracket inside the car, and if I have time, the turbo manifold heat shields. Oh, awesome. And this bracket. Now about here is where I'd like it. It's the traditional location, but there's a little bit of stuff in the way. So it'll probably be closer to over about here, and obviously the power steering is trying to occupy the same spot. I have thought of this, and I do have a plan. But for now, the power steering pump goes bye-bye. And the whole bracket needs to move out of the way. Okay, vertically I'm fine if I'm basically even with the alternator, if this represents the underside of the hood. I just have to watch where this fitting lies, and I think right around here is good because it's actually even with the intake manifold basically and the keg of the engine, so yay. Well, that's a shame. That was one of my favorite brackets. These mounting gears have never been useful. Okay, and now to line this up, probably guess where this is going to go. That was extremely satisfying. Just took the sharp edges off so I don't cut myself. I gotta clean all of this up a bit more later. Clearance achieved. About 2.5 inches between those welds as accurately as I can measure it. So mark it at 1 1/4. Then I think I'll space these about 3/4 of an inch from the ends. None of this can be massively accurate because of these welds here. A lot of heat capacity on this thing. Okay, got the first one all tacked in. Surprisingly, most of the heat capacity was in the intercooler. I was thinking it'd be that big chunk of bung. Apparently not. My welder does not have enough balls to weld this. With both brackets welded, now I can figure out exactly where this is going to sit. I've marked the center, and it lines up with the center of the alternator, which is basically the center of the engine. So that seems like a good place to start. And I'll just clamp it in place. Perfect. Now I just want to level it out. Made these mounting tabs off camera exactly the same way. I just made those bungs. Only difference is that it's 3/16 aluminum and it's a 1/4 inch larger in every dimension. Now a little bit of CAD helps connect the 2 points and at least get the general shape where it needs to be, which is about there. Added a little bit more material to work with, and now I'll just kind of trim it. I mean, the pen lines are superfluous, I don't really need them. Kind of a cool shape. That's about right. Needs a little bend in it. .3000 series aluminum, really easy to bend. Okay, that basically fits. Now here's the problem. There is no way to hold this together so I can tack it. There we go, big ugly tack. Okay, that just needs a little bit of adjustment, which is why this is a very strong but flexible tack. There we go, bend that over a little bit. Yeah, that's looking good. Oh, I think the chance of this working is about 0. It ain't pretty. There's a lot of tungsten on my aluminum, or aluminum in my tungsten, but it's tacked. Now that the location of the mounting flange is known, the rest of the assembly can take place on the bench instead of awkwardly straddling the car. So, through the magic of editing, the other 2 pieces get measured, cut, and tacked into place. Note that I had to switch to a stud on the right side because there's no room now to get a bolt through the hole. Well, the holes are in line. Looks like it still fits. Oh, that's warm. Well, even after all that heat, looks like it still fits. Although I'm definitely gonna have to clearance these welds and move to probably an Allen style bolt. Okay, just give this bottom bolt a snug, and that should lock the intercooler into position. Yep, nice and solid. This side is a little more complicated. I've stared at it for an hour, and I think what I'm going to do is plate in this area here, and then from there I can build my bracket without interfering with the crank angle sensor nor the idler pulley. Theoretically, I can just pop this piece on here, kind of line it up by eye, then trace the bottom. Close enough. About here and about here. And also close enough. Ah, that's a little better. Well, let's see how dirty this casting is. Ooh, surprisingly clean. Well, that's actually not too bad. bracket I make has to clear the idler pulley. So important to keep that in place. Need 2 bolt holes, 1 on each side. Here I'm a bit limited, so I'm kind of going to eyeball this and put it right here. Then put another one right about here. Now just have to mark the holes where I will drill . My bit is bent. Now I predict that once again the heads of these bolts are going to be really close to the weld, so as I had to do on the other side, upon final assembly, I will likely be using a different style head, like a Allen head, something that gives me a little bit more room. But for now, in mock-up, all I have are these hex heads. When connecting 2 points, it often helps to cut the sheet in half. Then it can be folded in case there's a compound angle or something like that. Cool. Now they line up. It looks like this bracket is going to have to be kind of Z-shaped or Z-shaped, whatever floats your boat. After about 20 more minutes of fiddling with this off camera and wishing I had a third hand, I think that's basically correct. This is the engine end, and I do want a little bit more beef on that end, because if I was to just connect the dots, I'd only end up with a bracket about a little more than a ½ inch wide, which is not enough bracket. So what I'm going to do is mark off, let's say, 1 inch here, and then that way it'll expand this end significantly. And that'll be a much beefier bracket. Okay, and just straighten these lines out a little bit by going over them with the ruler as a guide. Unlike the other one that I bent, I'm going to cut this one and weld it into shape, because I think it'll give me a much better result, and honestly it's going to be a lot easier considering there are 2 bends in opposite directions. And a quick tack to hold that in place. With both end pieces tacked stationary, looks like the middle piece is going to fit, though a tad long. It took 10 minutes off camera to tape this in exactly the right position, so let's hope I get this tack right. That'll do. Well, let's see how much tungsten I can get in this aluminum. That was surprisingly easy. I just have to be very careful when removing this, not to tweak it at all, because it's only held together by light tacks. I used the same cardboard pattern for the other side. With both sides tacked, it should be a little bit more dimensionally stable, but obviously I'll check it on the car first before continuing. Yep, looks like she still lines up. And from there, it's just a rinse and repeat of making cardboard templates and cutting out the pieces until all the holes are filled. That looks like it still fits. May have moved a little bit, but still fits. Pound the heat in here because I got to drill or grind, I should say, some of it off. Awesome. Even after all that welding, it still fits. And don't worry, I haven't forgot about the second hole. Obviously the title of your sex tape. Now I'll just drill both the top and bottom holes. out to a 1/2 inch. Then the holes just get a little minor clearancing with the Dremel. Oh, that's too much clearancing. And some 1/2 inch aluminum tube to fill the hole. Then what I'll do is cut just about 1/4 inch away from the highest point of that mark. It's about right. And then just trim this top down and level it off a bit. And remount the hole. And now, back on the car. It's always a pain in the ass to line these both holes up underneath. There we go. Glad to see the holes are still lining up. Now, I don't have the right bolts for this side of the bracket, so I'm just substituting a single M6. And now the moment of truth. The intercooler is now self-supporting. Of course, since I moved and rotated the intercooler, I'm willing to bet that the hoses no longer line up. Except for this side. I think this side is going to be fine because this bung was just down here previously. Yep, that looks like it's going to be no problem and actually looks pretty good. This side, however, has the potential to run into basically everything. The alternator, the coolant hose, this bracket. Yeah, no, that's just way too close to the alternator. And that's not even at full belt tension. And maybe something like that. Oh, you know what? Yeah, that'll do it. I rarely disassemble these AN fittings. Well, honestly, it looks like this is going to be really easy. All I have to do is reverse the fittings, putting the 90 degree on this side and the straight fitting on this side. The hoses will line up very well. And it does make things more straightforward when my hose line up. AN fitting hose sockets. use left-hand tightening threads. Always freaks me out. So a little bit of oil on the threads of the fitting. Then make sure the nipple goes into the hose. And I always push up a little bit on the hose and watch to make sure it doesn't push out of the socket. Perfect. The nice thing is I can use a hose clamp on the mounting bolt to hold the hose in place. Okay, looks like I need to cut right here at this mark. Very convenient. The nice thing about this cloth covered cable versus the braided stainless is that just a little bit of electrical tape to keep it from fraying, then you can cut it with a razor knife. If I measured right, this will fit without excessive slack or tightness. Really do hate excessive slack, and not too irritated by excessive tightness on my hose. Now these zip ties are just to hold it in position for now. Once it's thermal cycled a few times, it will hold its own position, and of course I will use some hose clamps on final assembly. Well, I think here's about as good a time as any to stop for this episode. It's getting kind of long. We'll take up the rest in part 2 when I refabricate all of the intake tubing.